Deep in a jungle no map dared to name, a team of soldiers followed the trail of something impossible, a wild elephant with a military tattoo. They thought it was a myth, a glitch in satellite data, until they saw it in a clearing bathed in smoke and silence. They found him, an old man sitting by a fire, his hands calloused, his eyes hauntingly calm. And beside him, the elephant knelt, like a soldier returning to command. One of the young soldiers whispered, "Who is he?" The old man looked up and said, "I didn't leave the war. The war left me." The jungle froze. Then a whisper came through comms. "Stand down. He's not alone." Because what they didn't know, the elephant wasn't the only one he'd marked. Deep in the tri-border region between Laos, Thailand, and Cambodia lies a stretch of jungle with no official name. Locals call it the Silent Triangle, or simply whisper, "Don't go past the river." Decades ago, it was a corridor for covert operations during the Vietnam War. Black ops missions with no paperwork, no backup, and no survivors if they failed. After the war, the jungle returned to stillness, or so it seemed. That stillness was shattered when a surveillance drone, part of a routine mapping operation, captured something inexplicable. A wild elephant with what appeared to be a United States military insignia burned or tattooed into its skin. Analysts thought it was a glitch, but the image ran through the Pentagon's recognition system and returned a 94% match to a special recon unit symbol. One disbanded in 1973 and officially listed as lost in hostile territory. Within hours, a team was quietly formed. No news, no rank insignias, no flags, just boots, gear, and orders. Alpha Echo 7, Phantom Trace. Lieutenant Mason Hale, early 30s, sharp, calculating, and cold under pressure, formerly served in Afghanistan. But his motivation runs deeper. His father disappeared during a classified mission in this very jungle in 1975. This assignment isn't just tactical, it's personal. Sergeant Elias Boone, the oldest member of the team, seen too many jungles, heard too many stories. When he reviewed the satellite image of the elephant, he went quiet, then muttered, "I've heard of him. A ghost some recon boys used to whisper about during watch shifts. Said he walks with the animals. Said he never left." Corporal Chris Alvarez, youngest in the unit, 23, curious and idealistic. He's the one who asked the question no one wanted to say out loud. If that marking's real, who's still alive to put it there? Private Tien Phan, a second-generation Vietnamese American. His quiet intelligence makes him the team's unofficial cartographer. While reviewing wartime archives, he came across old, torn photos, one of a bearded man standing beside an elephant. He thought it was just family myth. Mission objective: investigate and confirm the source of the strange signal and reported insignia-bearing animal. Engage only if threatened. Unofficial directive from command: if the subject is Roy Lockwood, priority extraction, alive if possible. And so they stepped into the jungle. But what none of them knew was that the man they were about to find was no longer just a soldier. He had become the jungle itself. From the moment Alpha Echo 7 set foot beneath the jungle canopy, it was clear something was wrong. Not hostile, just wrong. It wasn't the heat or the insects or the oppressive silence, though those things gnawed at the nerves. It was the order, the stillness, the way birds perched high and quiet like they were watching, the way nothing cracked unless they moved first. About 3 clicks in, they found the first anomaly. Boone was the one who noticed it. The old sergeant stopped, crouched low, and brushed his gloved fingers over a shallow depression in the mossy earth. It was a footprint, a massive one, round, almost perfect in form. An elephant's print, fresh. But what made them freeze wasn't the size, it was the pattern. 3 sets, Mason muttered. 1 adult, 2 smaller ones, single file formation. Elephants don't walk like that, Alvarez said quietly. Not wild ones. They do, Boone replied, if they've been trained. They followed the trail deeper. The prints were spaced evenly, deliberate, disciplined. not meandering like wild animals. This wasn't random migration. It was a patrol route. The jungle grew denser, the light dimmer. By midday, they reached a clearing where something else caught their eyes. Tien spotted it first, a mark carved into a tree trunk, waist high, just beneath a thick curtain of vines. They brushed it back to reveal a triangle intersected by two crossed sabers. It was the insignia of a U.S. Special Recon Unit from the 1970s. But more than that, the etching was clean, not weathered, not decades old. This was made with a carbon blade, Boone whispered, recent and deliberate. Mason stepped closer, squinting. No rust, no moss. 3 weeks old at most. That night, as they made camp in a hollow surrounded by thick underbrush, Alvarez took first watch. The air hung thick with humidity, and the crackle of bugs filled the silence. Then it changed. It was almost imperceptible, a shift in pressure, like something large had entered the space. Silently. And then he saw it. Across the brush, no more than 30 feet away, stood a juvenile elephant, small, maybe 4 or 5 years old. Its gray skin was caked in mud. Its ears fluttered. Its trunk twitched. But it didn't advance. It just stood there, eyes fixed on him. Alvarez didn't wake the others right away. He watched. The little elephant didn't eat, didn't move. It watched the camp, not like a predator, but like a sentry. He finally nudged Boone awake. The old sergeant blinked, rubbed his eyes, and froze. "That's not normal," he said flatly. "It's been there 20 minutes. Alvarez whispered. "Hasn't moved a step." Boone scanned the tree line. "No signs of herd?" "None." They waited. But before dawn, the young elephant turned and slipped into the jungle without a sound. The next day, the team moved in the direction the elephant had gone. The brush seemed lighter, the path slightly worn, almost like a trail had been maintained, not by machines, but by something that moved through it regularly. They followed for another 2 hours before something else happened. They entered a small glade surrounded by tall ferns, visibility low. Then the jungle went silent. No insects, no birds. And then came the low thud. 1, 2, 3, from all directions. Within seconds, they realized they were encircled. Out of the mist stepped not one, but 6 elephants, massive, quiet, their eyes oddly alert. They made no trumpeting sounds, no threatening gestures. They simply surrounded the team, forming a wide perimeter, trunks low, ears spread but calm. The team stood frozen, weapons raised but fingers off the trigger. Alvarez whispered, "They're not attacking." "No," Boone said grimly. "They're observing." For 10 full minutes the standoff remained, jungle mist curling between trunks and boots. No movement, no sound but breathing. Then, as if on cue, the elephants turned away, one by one, and disappeared into the trees. No aggression, no chaos, just withdrawal, like a unit dismissed by an unseen commander. That night around the fire, Mason broke the silence. "We're not dealing with animals." Boone nodded. "We're not," Tien added. "They moved with formation discipline. Someone trained them." "Not someone," Mason corrected. "A soldier, one of ours. Or someone who never stopped being one." There were no more jokes from Alvarez, no more theories. Only one question remained among them all. Who the hell is doing this, and why are we still being allowed in? Because by now, it was clear. They weren't tracking anything. They were being led. The jungle had turned against them. After the encirclement by the elephants, Alpha Echo 7 pressed deeper into terrain few dared enter. GPS cut out entirely. Compass readings spun. Even the sun above the canopy felt misplaced. Every step further blurred the line between hunter and hunted. Then came the rain. It started as a mist, cool, oddly refreshing, but within minutes it became a torrential curtain, blinding and deafening, soaking every stitch of gear. Visibility dropped to near zero. Mason called a halt. They ducked beneath a thick, low outcrop of banyan roots to wait out the storm. That's when they smelled it. Wood smoke. Not the musty scent of burned brush or lightning-struck branches. This was controlled, purposeful, a campfire. fresh. Boone stiffened. Someone's nearby. Tien pointed, his voice low. There's a flicker. Through the trees. Weapons raised, they fanned out silently. And in the clearing beyond the rain, like a pocket of time untouched, they saw him. He sat cross-legged beside a modest fire, beneath a large overhanging rock shelf that sheltered the flames. A battered tin pot hissed gently beside the coals. His back was straight, his posture calm, an old man. His white beard was long but clean. His face, creased with deep years and old sun, carried a stillness that made Mason feel like a child again. The old man's eyes were closed, and his right hand rested on the thick, dark hide of a massive elephant lying beside him like a faithful dog. The elephant was blackened with mud, unmoving except for the slow rise and fall of its ribs. A huge, majestic creature, and it had allowed this man to sit by its heart. No one spoke. They watched from the brush, uncertain whether to approach or run. Then, as if sensing their hesitation, the elephant stirred. It rose slowly, gracefully for its size, and turned. And as it did, its massive flank came into full view. There, unmistakably etched into the skin, was a mark, a triangle, two crossed sabers, a faded star, the insignia of a long-lost recon unit, Ghost Company, 5th Recon. Officially wiped off the books in 1974. The jungle didn't make a sound. Then the old man opened his eyes. They were steel gray, not blank, not dulled by age, but sharp, controlled, dangerous. He didn't flinch at the sight of them, didn't ask who they were. He simply looked at each one by one. When his eyes landed on Boone, he gave the faintest nod, almost imperceptible. No one moved. Alvarez's voice cracked slightly. "Sir, who are you?" The old man took a breath, slow and steady, as if breathing through the weight of decades. Then he said in English with a slight southern lilt, "I didn't leave them. They just stopped coming." The fire cracked softly beside him. The rain slowed. He reached into his coat, a tattered olive-green garment, faded beyond recognition, and pulled the fabric aside. On his chest, barely attached, was the stitched remnant of an insignia. The same insignia on the elephant's hide. Mason stepped forward. "Are you Roy Lockwood?" The name hung in the air like a match ready to strike. The man blinked once, slowly. Then he said, "That's what they called me." Tien stepped closer, his voice trembling. You were an Echo Delta, right?" "My grandfather, he told stories. A man who could disappear in the jungle. The elephants followed you. He said you walked through fire once and came out leading a herd." The old man looked at him for a long time, then gave a short nod. "I remember your grandfather," he said. "Didn't talk much. Good man, kept a photo of his daughter in his boot." Tien's knees nearly gave out. Boone whispered, "You've been here the whole time." Lockwood turned back to the fire. "Where else would I go?" Alvarez stepped forward, eyes wide. "But how? For 50 years. The old man stirred the fire gently with a stick. "They taught us to survive, son. I just never got the signal to stop." The elephant let out a low rumble and leaned its head closer to Lockwood. He placed his palm against its temple. "We weren't just soldiers out here. We were shadows, ghosts. I stayed because someone had to keep the balance. And these," he nodded at the elephant, "they're not animals. They're veterans, too." The silence afterward was almost holy. For a moment, none of the soldiers knew what to say. Then the comms crackled. A whisper from command. "Report status. Do you have visual on the signal origin?" Mason raised his mic slowly. His voice was low, reverent. "Yes, sir. We found him. Roy Lockwood is alive." Static. Then, "Stand by." Tien turned to Lockwood. "They'll want you to come back. You'll be a hero, a legend." But the old man only smiled, a quiet, weary smile. "I was never gone. I just stopped answering." He stood slowly. The elephant rose with him, in sync. Two warriors, two survivors, neither asking to be found. And for the first time, the soldiers understood. They weren't the ones discovering anything. They had been invited. He wasn't always the ghost of the jungle. Long before whispers echoed through recon camps about a man who walked with elephants, Roy Lockwood was just a soldier, a damn good one. His men called him Hammer not because he was violent, but because he was unyielding. Calm under fire, precise under pressure. If he gave you an order, it was because he'd already calculated the way home. He led Echo Delta Recon, a classified jungle recon unit trained for missions the Pentagon didn't put on paper. Deep insertions, no rescue plans, surveillance under fire, blending into jungle shadows and staying invisible until extraction, if it ever came. In 1973, as the final years of the Vietnam War unraveled into bitter, messy politics, his unit was tasked with a mission that, in hindsight, reeked of betrayal. Officially, they were to survey North Vietnamese arms movement across the Laotian border. Unofficially, they were sent into a corridor known only by one name in Pentagon circles: Zone Red Echo, a place no one ever came back from. Roy knew something was off the moment they were dropped. Intel was thin, maps were decades old, and their encrypted radio channel had strange interference. But orders were orders. For 3 weeks, they moved silently through unforgiving terrain, gathering evidence, logging coordinates. On the 22nd night, as they prepared for extraction, their comms went dead. Then the air rumbled. Not from the jungle, from above. Bombers. Friendly ones. By the time Roy looked up, half the sky was fire. What followed was a friendly fire incident that never made the news. Napalm and cluster rounds swallowed the canopy. Trees exploded into dust. Screams dissolved into static. Lockwood didn't remember blacking out, but he remembered the heat, the way fire has a sound, the crack of bone, the silence of men gone too fast. When he woke, he wasn't alone. A massive creature was standing over him, mud smeared across her flanks, trunk extended cautiously toward his leg. At first he thought it was hallucination, until she nudged his chest, firm but gentle. An elephant, a wild one. But something in her movement was different, measured, almost deliberate. She had pulled him from the flames. His leg was broken, ribs cracked, burns covered half his side. He should have died. But somehow she returned again and again, bringing fruit, clearing brush, even guarding him while he lay helpless. And over days, others came. A small herd, 3 females, 2 calves, a massive bull. They didn't treat him as a threat. They treated him as something else, a wounded part of the herd. Roy built a lean-to from the wreckage of fallen trees, learned to walk again using a stick. The nearest village was over 60 clicks away, but he didn't go. No helicopters came. No voice crackled over the radio. Washington had changed its story. The war was ending. The names of Lockwood's men were already marked KIA. Their mission file, buried in some locked cabinet labeled compartmentalized. And just like that, Roy Hammer Lockwood ceased to exist. But he didn't die. He lived. Day by day, year by year, he stayed with the elephants. He learned their patterns, their rhythms, their social language. He could mimic their calls. He knew how to earn their trust, not by force, but through presence, patience, respect. One calf he named Shadow. She would later grow to become the massive black elephant seen by the recon team. She had been orphaned after poachers took her mother. Roy defended her once, driving off 2 men with nothing but a stick and a whistle. She never left him after that. Eventually, he began marking them. Not ownership, but tribute. He would take old jungle knives and carve insignias into tree trunks, and eventually onto their skin, softly, carefully in symbolic places. Each tattoo represented one of his fallen men, not for glory, not for memory alone, but as a way of bringing them home, even if no one else cared. He taught the herd discipline, gently shaping their patrols, routines, and even how they moved through the forest. They became his sentinels, his family, his army. He trained them in formation, reaction to sound, recognition of rifles. Some called it myth, but in time their behavior became legend among border villagers. The elephants that don't run from bullets, they walk toward them. Roy never intended to return to America. He tried once, early on, after nearly dying from infection. He limped to a border camp, used an old code phrase. They thought he was insane, called him a drifter. One even laughed when he showed his recon tattoo. That was the last time he reached out. They didn't forget us, he once whispered to Shadow. They just moved on without us. In time, he stopped counting the years. He buried his team, each grave marked with stones and jungle symbols. But they remained with him, always. Every time a thunderstorm passed, he'd sit by the fire and call the roll. Weber, Kim, Sanders, Doyle. Each name followed by silence. Each silence held with reverence. To those who passed through the jungle and claimed it was haunted, he never corrected them. Let them fear what they couldn't see, because he was still here, not waiting, not hiding, just watching. And when the soldiers came, young and uncertain, treading the same ground he once did, he didn't confront them. He welcomed them, quietly, calmly, like a man who once wore a flag on his shoulder and had replaced it with earth and memory and silence. For a long while, none of them spoke. The crackle of the fire filled the silence between Roy Lockwood and the young soldiers who now sat around him, not as recon professionals, but as students before a living legend. The jungle, too, seemed to lean in, breathless, reverent, listening. When Lockwood finished speaking, when the final syllable of the last soldier's name passed from his lips like an old prayer, Sergeant Elias Boone lowered his head. It was Alvarez who broke first. The youngest of the group, his eyes brimmed with a storm of emotions. Awe, guilt, sorrow, and something deeper. Shame for how easily his generation had forgotten. A tear slipped down his cheek, and he didn't bother wiping it away. I joined the army because I wanted to be part of something bigger, he whispered. But I never imagined I'd meet someone who was the something bigger. Tien Phan didn't speak. He simply took a slow, trembling breath and offered Lockwood a small folded cloth. A photo, worn thin and faded. It was of his grandfather in uniform, younger than any of them. Lockwood took it gently, nodded once, and said nothing. Even Mason Hale, stoic, restrained, unreadable Mason, stood without a word and walked several paces away. He raised the antenna on the long-range radio pack, tuned the frequency, and keyed in. Alpha Echo 7 reporting. This is Hale. We found him. A long pause. Repeat. Confirmed ID. Roy Lockwood is alive. More silence. Then static. Then a voice. Calm, older, unmistakably high-ranking. Say again? Hale repeated with steady breath. This is Roy Hammer Lockwood, Recon Commander. Status, alive. Coordinates transmitting. There was no further protocol, no challenge phrase. Just a beat of stunned silence. Then the voice returned. This time slower, firmer. Stand by, we're coming. Exactly 7 days later, just after dawn broke through the thick morning mist, the rumble of a rotor echoed through the jungle. The clearing had been marked with smoke and signal panels, but Roy hadn't helped prepare it. He simply sat by his fire, as he always did, with the great elephant Shadow at his side. Tien Alvarez and Boone stood at full attention as the CH-47 Chinook descended in slow, deliberate grace. But no one moved to board. From the rear ramp, 3 officers stepped down, followed by a 4th, a general, hair silver, medals heavy on his chest. He saluted before even reaching the old man. Sir, we weren't sure if this day would ever come. Roy didn't rise. He just nodded and patted the elephant's side. The general knelt beside him. We're not here to bring you back, sir. We're here to tell you. We remember. He set down a sealed case. Inside was a replacement uniform, perfectly folded. Lockwood touched it briefly, then closed the case without a word. No need, he murmured. A moment passed. Then without fanfare, every soldier, young and old, stood at attention and saluted. Not because protocol demanded it, but because they couldn't not. Even Shadow, the great elephant, lifted her trunk and let out a deep, humming note. Soft, low, powerful. A sound that carried through the clearing and beyond. Roy looked toward the treetops. This jungle was never just a place, he said. It was my command, my silence, my home. He turned to Hale. Tell them I'm fine. No medals, no press. Just leave this place as it is. Hale nodded. The general, unshaken, stood back. He raised his own radio. Extraction declined. Subject requests no interference. We will honor that. As the helicopter rose and vanished into the mist once more, leaving only wind and memory behind. Lockwood sat again at his fire. The soldiers remained a little longer. None of them wanted to be the first to walk away. The helicopter had long since vanished behind the jungle mist, but Roy Lockwood remained seated by the fire as if no time had passed. His face, weathered by war and solitude, wore the calm of a man who had already said his goodbye decades ago. Lieutenant Hale approached quietly. "They're still willing to bring you back, sir. Medal of Honor, parade, maybe even a presidential welcome." Roy gave a half smile, not bitter, but full of something deeper. Something final. "The country I swore to protect. I've carried it right here," he said, pressing two fingers to his chest. "Not in parades, not in speeches, in silence, in doing what had to be done, long after they forgot we were ever here." There was no resentment in his voice, only a kind of peace. Still, there was one thing he asked of them. He led the team to the edge of the clearing where the roots of an ancient tree coiled into the earth like veins. At its base, mostly hidden beneath years of moss and leaf fall, was a small metal case, rusted but sealed. Boone helped him lift it. It was heavier than it looked. Heavy not with weight, but with meaning. Inside was a folded stack of old black and white photographs, grinning young men in fatigues, holding canteens, leaning against trees now lost to fire. There was a small leather-bound notebook, its pages yellowed with time, filled with hand-sketched maps, radio codes, coordinates, Lockwood's field log, never turned in. And nestled beneath it all, glinting faintly in the soft forest light, was a silver star, its ribbon worn but untarnished. Roy looked at Hale. "Take these home. Make sure they don't vanish like the men they belong to. Don't put them in a museum. Don't hang them in glass. Just give them to the right hands. Someone who'll remember why we wore them." The men stood around him in silence, heads bowed, not in mourning, but in reverence. Tien folded the box into his rucksack, his fingers lingering on the old insignia etched into the lid. They prepared to leave the next morning. No one wanted to say goodbye. No one wanted to leave him behind. But Roy made it easy. He didn't wave. He didn't tear up. He just nodded once. Final. Solid. Like a salute. Just as the team began to move, the great elephant, Shadow, stepped forward. She raised her trunk slowly, deliberately, her eyes locking with Alvarez's, and she saluted. A low, drawn-out trumpet echoed through the clearing, not loud, not fearful, but respectful. A farewell. The sun broke through the canopy just then, a shaft of golden light slicing through the trees, falling directly on her flank. There, illuminated in full, was the old recon insignia, faded, aged, but unmistakable. The men froze. In that moment, the jungle was no longer just trees and shadows. It was a living memorial. Back at base, when they turned in the box, no reporters came. No press release followed. But 1 week later, a new addition was quietly made to an aging war memorial wall. 7 names previously marked as missing presumed dead were updated to confirmed fallen, witness verified. No one asked how. No one needed to. And in a certain part of the Pentagon, beneath layers of bureaucracy, a single sentence was scribbled into a once-closed file. Roy Lockwood, status, living, location, classified. Recommendation, no further action. Let the jungle keep what belongs to it. Some people spend their lives chasing medals, titles, and recognition. But others, like Roy Lockwood, don't need any of that. They don't ask to be seen. They don't demand to be remembered. They simply live with honor, even when no one's watching, even when no one comes back for them. Roy never stood in front of a podium. He never gave speeches. Yet in the silence of the jungle, in the loyalty of an elephant, in the breath of trees that grew over forgotten graves, he built a legacy louder than any applause. He didn't need a parade. He just needed not to be erased. And maybe there's someone like him in your life too. Maybe it's a quiet man who sits on the same park bench every morning, always early, always alone. Maybe it's a neighbor who never talks much, but whose American flag never misses a sunrise. Or maybe it's a woman who raised 3 children on her own after losing someone in uniform, never asking for praise, never needing thanks. Have you ever known someone like Roy Lockwood? Someone who carried something heavy and never said a word. They might not live in the jungle. They might live right next door. We created this story not just to honor Roy, but to honor everyone like him. Those who serve in silence, those who protect without applause, those whose lives, though hidden, change the world more than we'll ever know. If this story reminded you of someone, a grandfather, a friend, a forgotten name on a dusty frame, we'd love to hear about them. Share their name in the comments. Let this be a wall of memory, a garden of honor. And if Roy's journey moved you, if you want to keep hearing stories of quiet courage and forgotten heroes, hit that subscribe button, like the video, and share this with someone who needs to be reminded. Not all heroes want to be seen, but all of them deserve to be remembered. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story.